note, for maximum picture quality, it may be necessary to adjust the tracking control on your VCR.
This is a bit of a monologue, actually. This might be a bit too long. You can tell me off if you think it's boring and long. Destruction looms large in Japanese media, quite understandably. And
boring.
In Akira... Ah!
Sorry. So I'm sorry. Go again.
Yeah, it's fine. That made me laugh. Destruction looms large in Japanese media, understandably. And in Akira, the whole movie revolves around a series of destructions that irrevocably change the characters' lives. But to understand why Akira looms so bright in pop culture is not to focus upon destruction, but creation. Akira was, for all intents and purposes, the first anime to ever be shown to a Western audience. And what they saw in theatres and on VHS in the 80s was pure, unadulterated Japanese animation in its most beautiful, violent, mind-blowing and complicated and emotional and unflinching style. It's really not hyperbole to say that Akira revolutionised animation in the West. But, you know, we're just Adjust Your Tracking, a podcast where we're on an adventure to watch a century of cinema decade by decade, year by year. I am one half of your host, Liam, and with me is...
Hello, I'm Oliver Jones.
Hello.
Hello.
I took a big breath in that. Can you take that out of the edit? It made it sound funny to me. Apparently this is going in.
What's that Coal Chamber song that starts off with that? Do you remember?
Oh, what is that called? Yeah. Oh my god.
Is it Loco? Loco.
Yeah, Loco. Yes. Yes, it is. Loco. Coal Chamber. Whatever happened to Coal Chamber? Are they still existing? Oh, they disbanded in 2017.
No, but the other guy's got Des something or other. He's got a band. I forgot what they're called. Devil Driver?
Farah? Des Fafara? Oh, he looks old.
Speaking of old, I know we don't talk about this person anymore, but have you seen Marilyn Manson recently?
I saw you. I did.
Looks like Nanny McPhee or something.
Gothy Nanny McPhee.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, good, because he's a horrible person.
100%.
A horrible, horrible person. And he can be happily cancelled. And just now having a look at personal life section for the singer Coal Chamber. No, it doesn't seem to be anything. So you can mention him still. That's the first thing you have to do when you ever look up someone. Scroll down on Wikipedia to personal life section just to check.
He
what
was
they're like.
He did loads of like anti-Trump videos and stuff like that around the time. Yeah, he's very kind of in on that kind of thing back when Trump was being elected and stuff like that.
No way, I wouldn't have expected that from Coal Chamber.
Do you remember the song the cover of the Peter Gabriel song they did with Ozzy?
Yeah, Shock the Monkey.
Yeah. You gotta shock the monkey. Hey, hey.
God, I reckon if they'd done Akira kind of 10 years later, it would have been full of new metal.
Well, do you remember when they did the Western version of Street Fighter 2, the movie?
I do not remember that. Yeah,
so you had like the Japanese version probably had more traditional music. The English version had like Korn, Alice in Chains. Who else was on it? Who's that Australian? Silverchair, KMDMF or whatever.
Yeah. KMFDM, Smoking Sukkahs with Logic.
Yeah.
Black/Note, Silverchair, Alice in Chains, Dem Bones.
I love that song, but it doesn't need to be in a Street Fighter movie.
I can't believe they redubbed it with metal. Yeah, Korn Blind is in it. Blind.
I always remember like the very end, it's kind of got Ryu's like walking down the road. Like, you know, kind of like at the end of the game when you complete Ryu and he's just like walking off into the sunset. It has that, and he's kind of got his like sack over his shoulder and stuff. And then this truck comes driving behind them, and you hear going meep 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 meep, and driving it is M. Bison. Ryu turns around, and I think he goes to do his hurricane kick or whatever, and then he just goes, "Are you ready?"
No way. We used to watch that a lot. I remember that.
My 12-year-old me was bopping around my living room.
Did they ever do a sequel where he fought truck bison?
They did like a sequel series, but I think if I remember, I'm sure I watched some of it yours, and the animation was like appalling.
Yeah.
And then they did a Street Fighter Alpha film as well.
They did Alpha, yeah, I remember Alpha. I don't remember it being good.
That one was better, I think. The Street Fighter 2 animated movie was actually really good, I think. If I remember. It had a really... a lot of... We'll get to this later on when we talk more about Akira, but had like ridiculous like nude scene of Chun-Li, which is like, why is like... It's not a rape scene, but it almost is, where Vega attacks her.
Oh, it basically is a rape scene.
Yeah, and it's like this is not
yeah.
It's not needed. But
this is not required.
Like when you're 12, you don't really think much of it. Like, oh, boobs. But like when you get a bit older, you're like, come on.
It's needlessly like kind of traumatic and disturbing for what is effectively a kid's thing. Like, but you don't think of that when you're younger. You just think that's happening. You don't kind of question that.
I remember we tried to make our own Street Fighter films. Remember, and we had you lying on the floor as M. Bison or whatever. Yes. And I panned the camera backwards, and it made you look like you were flying backwards as opposed to like.
Yes, I remember that really well. My backward psycho crusher.
Yeah.
Because we all played two characters each, and I remember like my two characters, one had glasses on, the other person didn't have glasses on, and I kept forgetting.
And we were really clever because we had scenes where your two characters were talking to the same person to each other, and you kept forgetting to put your glasses on and off, and in between takes, like, oh shit,
oh shit. And then because it was largely improvised as well, I'd get confused who I was playing, and I'd get really aggressive because I was the enemy and like friend, and you'd be like, no, you're playing Ken now or whatever it was. I'd be like, oh, okay, let's go beat him up.
I remember Rob had to be Vega because my sister made an Aladdin costume for me because I think we had like a Disney day at school and we all dressed up as a Disney character or something.
Okay.
And so Rob wore my Aladdin costume and pretended to be Vega. Good stuff. Good times.
Good times. I don't remember Disney Day at school. What was Disney Day?
I don't know if it was Disney Day, but it could have been just a fancy dress thing, and I just happened to dress up as Aladdin. But
it could have been just a Friday, and you just came in dressed as Aladdin.
Just came as Aladdin. Wearing if you think about it, it's a little white boy wearing a fez and stuff like that. It's a little bit problematic now, but you know.
Well, to be honest, as long as you weren't blacking yourself up.
I don't think I was. I'll have to check photos, but I don't think I was. That would have looked really bad. Jeez.
Plead the fifth.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we got off on a bit of a tangent right at the start.
Yeah.
Have you been watching anything recently?
Well, actually, while doing research for this film, like watching some like YouTube essays, I accidentally watched a film on YouTube.
Okay.
And it's called Rock and Rule. Have you ever heard of this?
No, not at all.
So it's from 1983, and it's like a Canadian animated musical sci-fi fantasy kind of film. Okay. So if you kind of think heavy metal or whatever, it's like that kind of thing. Yeah. But it's set in the future where humans have like died, but animals have become I can't pronounce it. Anthropomorphized. And I mean, if you watch the film, they don't really look it, but they're meant to be like dogs, and some of the characters are mice and stuff like that, which you can kind of tell them a bit more, or rats or whatever. And a lot of the voices are voiced by people in like Cheap Trick, or Debbie Harry's one of the voices, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, members of
the main character actually looks like Debbie Harry, doesn't he?
Yeah. And it was such a bizarre, odd film. Basically, it came around about the same time as heavy metal and stuff like that. In fact, the animation company of this film were asked by the people who are making heavy metal to make a segment for heavy metal, but they went, no, because we're going to do our own feature film. Yeah. And apparently the film was kind of, I wouldn't say improvised, but it was kind of literally just made up as they went along. And kind of, if they had plot holes, they'd have to go back and animate extra scenes to kind of pop in and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like a notorious film that before the film even came out, I think, the original negative or whatever got completely burnt, it got destroyed. And so
Wow.
the versions that are around of like a hodgepodge of different versions they had that they had to like cobble together. And it was, I think it was funded by United Artists. And back in like the early 80s, I think United Artists were bought by MGM. And MGM like butchered the film to fuck. And then when they put it out, they kind of just buried it pretty much, and the film just kind of like died. And so much so that apparently if you sent a blank cassette tape to the production company, they'd mail you back a copy of the film.
Cool.
And but yeah, just the general plot of the film is you've kind of got this like aging rock star called Mock, and he's basically, if you look at him, he looks a bit like Mick Jagger, and I think they wanted Mick Jagger to play him.
Yeah, I can see it, Mick Jagger-y. And he's meant to be a dog or a mouse. I can't tell.
Yeah,
which...
a dog kind of thing. I don't know.
He's kind of a dog. He's definitely he's definitely like animal. He's got like a muzzle and stuff.
They've all kind of got little kind of like button noses and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But so he plays like this aging rock star who plays I think basically his main gripe is that he's the villain. Is that people didn't like his last album and his like last gig or whatever at the what's that big venue in New York?
Madison Square Garden.
Madison Square Garden, yeah. I think it was like a massive flop, and basically he wants to get his revenge on the world by bringing to life this demon from hell. And the only way to get this demon from hell is to get this person with the perfect voice that has to sing these particular notes or this song, and it like brings the devil to life, this monster to life. And so it just so happens that this girl in a rock band has the perfect voice, so they kidnap her. And and then her rock band have to kind of go and save her, or reluctantly go and save her.
It sounds quite good.
It's kind of like a mishmash of kind of like heavy metal, but also like a bit of a goof. They kind of look a bit goof troopy and stuff like that.
They do look a little goof troopy, yeah.
And but
it's really weird just looking at it up. Like they had different voice actors for like the speaking roles and the singing roles. Yeah. So like Debbie Harry doesn't actually; she just does the singing, and both Lou Reed and Iggy Pop do the singing for Mock. So it's not even one person. That's really weird. But going down the list, like Maurice LaMarche is in it, and the Catherine O'Hara's in it, which is really weird.
But like if you look at like it cost $8 million to make. It made $30,000. Like, but if you look at the design, like if you look at the design work of like the backgrounds, even the animation's fantastic. Sure. And like
it does look really good. Yeah.
Watching Akira, they've all got flying cars and stuff, and you can all feel this sense. Like we'll talk again about it with Akira, but have you ever heard of the artist Mobius? The French artist. Yeah. You can tell that they're all influenced by this guy, kind of like. This hodgepodge of kind of like even Star Wars to an extent was as well, like this hodgepodge of like kick bashing these things together to make these like flying vehicles and stuff like that. And yeah, it just looks fantastic. And it just what I love about it is that it doesn't look like Disney or anything. It looks like its own.
It looks like something different. Yeah.
And it was just such a like I'm not going to say the film's amazing, but it's
But it's an artifact. It's
really cool in one way. I mean, it's got like a weird kind of, like characters have nipples and things like that. Like, because they're trying to make it a bit adult and a bit edgy and stuff like that. So it's just like a bit okay, but like, did you ever see a film called Cool World, the Ralph Bakshi film?
I haven't. Have I seen Cool World? I know it. I'm not sure if I actually watched it. I might not have watched it.
That's another film where like the budget was like stripped from under them as they were like filming it and stuff like that. So like there's meant to be a nightclub scene where you see like loads of punters and stuff like that in the nightclub. But what they did in the end was they couldn't film any of that. So as Kim Basinger's character is kind of singing, they just animate characters around the edge of the screen, just dancing around. It's really bizarre. And they kind of do a similar thing in this where you just kind of hear the audience as opposed to like actually seeing them and stuff like that. But
because that's just ridiculously more expensive to animate those characters. Like,
but there is actually a nightclub scene in this where they're trying to look for the main girl. They're trying to find her and stuff. And it's actually really well animated. And there's actually quite a few punters. But when there's like gigs and stuff, you don't really see like any crowd and stuff like that. And there's also like one of the henchmen for the villains. Like there's three brothers, and one of them throughout the film is watching like a kids show that's all about being good. And like he's asked, like they're a bit simple or whatever, and he's asking Mock, again, are we good? And questioning what they do and stuff like that. And at the end, Mock like kills one of the brothers, and then one of the henchmen then kills Mock at the end. Spoilers for a nearly 40-year-old film.
But like it's kind of cool because all the stuff you're saying is really a key to how animation was treated in the 80s.
Oh yeah,
and
massively.
Like we'll get to why Akira happened in Japan, but like the treatment of like American animation was never treated with any respect animation was never treated with any respect in America, and it was always subject to these cuts, these kind of slashes, these like throwaway releases and stuff like that. It was it was either for kids or no one else. I mean, like when they did Lord of the Rings, they had to cut so many corners with that there's this like really awkward Xeroxed kind of photocopied live action footage, and it's trying to mimic animation. It just looks terrible and stuff like that. And it's Bashki's project again, wasn't it? Like to try and get that, and they promised him a sequel, but he never got it, and so he weirdly wraps up Lord of the Rings at the midpoint. It's
after Helm's Deep, it's like, and then they rode off,
and then they won.
Yeah.
really weird little thing that Lord of the Rings film is. Like it's not a complete classic to me, but it is really interesting. Like,
well, Bashki had quite a bit of success with Fritz the Cat. That actually did really well, I think. But then all of his films following that, I think Lord of the Rings did okay, but like all the ones following that kind of like lost more and more and more money and stuff like that. And some of his films were a bit questionable in terms of taste and stuff like that, especially with black characters and stuff like that.
Well, he's an incredibly questionable guy as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think those things started to clash as well in his like life, really. Because Cool World was the last thing he made until he made a short film. Like Cool World was the last thing they let him do, basically. But
yeah, that's like a podcast in itself, Cool World, because the production on that was insane. Like Kim Basinger basically wanted to have a film to take to kids in hospital to show them and stuff like that, which is like not the film that
what
Bashki wants to make. This really kind of adult film noir. Like he wants to make the adult version of Roger Rabbit, essentially.
He did.
They just wanted another Roger Rabbit,
and it's insane that you'd hire Bashki to do that.
Oh yeah.
It's insane you'd think he would do that, but whatever.
But anyway, Rock and Roll, I actually really recommend. It's on YouTube, free to watch.
It sounds fun.
And I think outside of America, it's called Ring of Power.
That's cool, though. That's something different.
How about you? You watched anything?
Yeah, so I've been watching quite a bit, but I've got a couple of new releases I watched that I might as well talk about. So I watched Cry Macho by Mr. Clint Eastwood.
Oh,
like I can't believe he's 92. Is
he 92 now?
He's something like that. He's definitely in his 90s. It's definitely. I don't want to age him too much. Let's quickly look up how old Clint Eastwood is.
I wouldn't be surprised.
He is 91. Okay, sorry, I aged you by a year.
Like his mom didn't die that long ago, if I remember. Like he was still taking the Oscars and stuff.
What's in his genes? Clint Eastwood, I think no matter what I think of him, no matter what I think of his politics, and no matter what I think of like him as a filmmaker, any time a new Clint Eastwood film comes out, it's an event for me, honestly. Like
really?
I think he makes everything he makes is uniquely him, in a way that I don't think any other filmmaker gets close to. And again, that's not a mark on its quality of a film, but they're just so uniquely him. And you got stuff like Unforgiven is a fucking masterpiece. Like it really is a fucking masterpiece. I kind of like The Mule. Mystic River is quite good. $1 Million Baby, that's a fucking weird film. I didn't like it. Richard Jewell I thought was awesome. Like I really
Changeling.
did. Like, The Changeling, I did not like that film.
I mean, I saw it at the cinema, but I couldn't tell you anything about it now.
It's about a fucking serial killer that is. It's so weird. That fucking film is so weird.
But it's about a kid that's like mistaken for being another kid, isn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, it's a really complicated story about like basically this kid comes back to this mother who's missing, and she's like, "This isn't my son," but the kid's been told by the police to just pretend that you are, so they can write off this like missing case. But like Clint doesn't really want to go out. This is the most anti-police Clint ever is, in his films, and he doesn't really go after them hard enough, I think, really. So when you finish the film, it's a bit like, I don't really know what happened. I'm confused of why was the kid but saying he was her son? Like, what the fuck was going on? Like, and in the middle of it is the fact that the kid disappears because of a serial killer, which never really gets resolved in the film. Well, it does, but it's just, again, it's a bit weird. It's like a side story.
Speaking of serial killers, apparently they've found out who the Zodiac killer is now, today.
Have they? Really?
Apparently so, yeah. I don't know.
I haven't seen that in the news. But Cry Macho, it's okay. Again, it's okay. I kind of enjoyed watching it. Again, he's 91 and he's directed this. It's kind of like watching it going, I can't believe a 91-year-old man is starring in a film. That's got a romance plot in the middle of it as well, which is always insane for Clint. Like, it's fine. It's fine. And it's just a bit... It's just a bit sappy, I guess, really. It's a very soft film for Clint. It's very much like a nice little soft film, and with Clint in the centre of it. I kind of enjoyed watching it. I wouldn't really recommend it, if that makes sense. Hard to kind of say, but I would like to see him get up for an Oscar for it.
Yeah,
I think he could. Maybe if it came out a little later, he could have got Best Actor for it. Maybe. But it's not like his performance is good. I just mean in literal Oscar terms, in the way that they like to look at actors and they like to give awards. Actually, that would fit that pan, really. And God, I think the Oscars would like to give a 91-year-old Clint an Oscar. I think they would really like to do that. But does it deserve it? I don't know.
I mean, no one's had a career like that ever, surely.
No.
It's just... I mean, I know that... what's his name? Mary Poppins. What's his name?
Dick Van Dyke.
Dick Van Dyke. He's still working, and he's like 90. He's like 97 or something. Found out he married a 40-year-old.
Oh God. Fair enough.
Fair enough. But he's still going.
No, it's insane. But I like a lot of respect for Clint. Just that career is insanity. Like, it really is.
I mean, like, when you talk about, like, okay, Spielberg has had like 3 kind of different paths in his career. Like, Clint Eastwood's had about 7. Do you know what I mean? Like, he had his 80s tough guy thing. Then he did Unforgiven, where he became like the kind of decided, okay, I'm old now, I'm going to lean into this. And then he started.
The insane thing about Unforgiven is that it's a filmmaker's last film. Like, that's what that's about.
I know.
Like, it's like about a guy who's had a whole career doing one last ride off into the sunset, making one last thing, and it's a masterpiece. It's a fucking masterpiece. So that was in '92. And he's just released one this year. It's insanity.
Well, was Gene Hackman in that as well? He was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Gene Hackman's like 92 now, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's insane. Like, for me, Gene Hackman, I think because he stopped performing anything, he's always been Royal Tenenbaum age, so he's always been like 70 or whatever.
Yeah,
but I keep forgetting he's probably like 92, 90 odd now.
Well, like, Richard Harris is in Unforgiven. Like, obviously he's no longer around.
But yeah.
It's insane. He's just had such an interesting career to me, and I love them. I love his weird little crime films he was making in like the kind of 2000s. I think they're really fun. I kind of would like more people to make little weird crime movies again, because I miss them. Like, not that mid-budget kind of role. I think he was good at doing that.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't mean the film's a masterpiece. It's quite like comfort food. I will sit down and watch blood work as like just fucking comfort, really. And I just miss that kind of stuff, really. And I think Clint still does that. Like, I think that's what his films fill that role for me, Even when he's knocking at the door of those kind of prestige Oscar films, they don't do much for me. Like Invictus doesn't do anything for me, but Richard Jewell kind of worked for me, which is really at its heart just a low budget crime thing, really.
Right.
And The Mule's the same. The Mule's just a low budget crime film, really, and that it works for me.
Has he got anything else lined up now, or? No,
he hasn't got anything lined up now. A nice sit down and a cup of tea is what he's got lined up.
Didn't they do his family have got like a reality show, haven't they?
Have they?
Yeah,
Scott
or
Eastwood, him.
Like the Osbournes. There's like a show that follows the Eastwoods. Pretty sure.
I didn't know that.
It's like I think there's even a show that follows the Wahlberg brothers about their Wahlburgers. Yeah,
there is a Wahlburger. There is. He's got 8 kids. At least 8 is what it says here, so they're not sure if there might be more. That's amazing. Legend, living legend, Clint. Even if you don't necessarily agree with him all the time, I guess that's my kind of takeaway for him. Another person that you shouldn't agree with is the other film I watched this week.
Oh, okay.
I watched The Card Counter by Paul Schrader, who Paul Schrader.
He's been like on a car crash of just I don't know. It's weird.
My favourite thing about The Card Counter is on its release, the studio told Paul Schrader to get off Facebook for a few weeks to not make any headlines. And he went to Facebook to tell everyone this. What a fucking weirdo Paul Schrader is. And his Facebook posts are just a thing of legends, frankly. But The Card Counter, pretty good. It's a good film.
Again, who's in that then?
It is Oscar Isaacs, and it's so Isaac. I always give him an S on the end, like he's what's his name? Hello to Jason Isaacs.
Oh, Isaacs. Yeah.
Isaac, yeah, and it's really nice to see him in an adult film again, frankly. I think that might be the best thing about it, that he's actually just, doing some acting in a film. But it's really good. It's not perfect, but it's one of those things that's like, this is an adult film, this is just an adult film about adult problems and things. And these are the type of films when I was 12, when you kind of started learning what that proper films exist, that you would see and be like, oh, that film over there, that's an adult film. It's not for people like me.
Yeah.
And this is what that feels like watching it. It feels like one of those films that was like, it's not marketed to anyone but just grown-ups, and it's about everything bad and Paul Schrader and everything, and it's about crime and guiltiness and indecency and justice and blah 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 blah. But it's good. It's good. And William Dafoe, brilliant in it again. And Tiffany Haddish, I think, really, really good. I think Tiffany Haddish is really, really, really good in it. Almost worth watching it for her.
So it's nice that these films are still being made with fairly big actors as well, I guess.
Yeah. I guess a guy like Oscar Isaacs gets given the opportunity to work with Paul Schrader. You just take it, don't you?
Because what was the one he did before? Was it First Reformed?
First Reformed, yeah, which I loved.
It's a good film, yeah.
Yeah, he's I haven't seen all his films. I've never seen Mishima, which is always the one everyone goes on about.
Right.
Was that his first directed one after when he started directing? Because obviously he was a writer for Taxi Driver and stuff But An American Gigolo, did he direct that? Maybe, or did he just write it? I don't know. But anyway, Paul Schrader, watch him follow him on Facebook, and see the car crash that exists. But I enjoyed both of them. I did.
It's weird that Oscar Isaac is going to be Solid Snake. He's the person who I just can't picture him as Solid Snake. It's such a...
I didn't actually know that.
Odd casting choice.
Anyone as Solid Snake's an odd casting choice.
Yeah, I guess you're right, really. I mean...
Well, apart from, obviously, Kurt Russell.
Well, Kurt Russell, or I don't know, Keith Sutherland, maybe. I don't know. I mean, he voices him in the latest game, doesn't he?
I just meant because he was based on Kurt Russell.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, yeah, pretty much.
Because of Escape in New York, Escape from New York, Escape in New York.
But yeah, that's going to be a weird film. I don't know how you'd translate that into a feature film.
I don't. It's hard to care.
Yeah, that's also
because the games are so like such a complete bit of media. It's hard for just to like, well, okay, you're going to make a film of this. Okay, like what more are you going to bring to this than the games do? Like, what's apart from like making a boatload of money? What more can you do with like that kind of franchise by making it a film? The whole like success of it is the mix of like filmic and like interactive gaming. That's been the whole success of the whole series. The
success of those games is Hideo Kojima, and if you it's like he's an auteur in video games, isn't he? Really?
Yeah.
And to try and get someone else to make that just feels wrong to me. Like I think
weird.
The guy who did Kong Skull Island or whatever, he's doing the film.
Oh, not him. Whatever his name is again. Yeah.
And I don't know, just like why wouldn't you get Hideo Kojima to do it? I don't know. It just seems weird.
Probably because he refuses to do it.
Maybe that's a good point. Maybe
another reputedly problematic guy to work for as well.
Oh, really?
I think he's just singularly minded. I think is what I've heard about.
Yeah,
him, really.
Basically, what I say goes, kind of.
Yeah, works people to the absolute bone because that's how he thinks people should be. You know, that's how he works, kind of thing. Like I think that kind of stuff. So,
what are we talking about today, then, Liam?
Okay, we're going all the way to Neo-Tokyo to talk about 1988's Japanese animated feature film, Akira.
Akira. クラウンのやつを感情拷問に追い込んだぜ。我々が変えるのではない。アキラを望む人民が変えるのだ。もうよせ、鉄を。殺す気か。うるさい。俺に命令すんな。あの力には触れてはならんのかもしれんな。
It's funny how you know it's called Neo-Tokyo.
Yeah.
So the film that I watched, Rock and Roll, I don't know if I mentioned it, but New York is now Nuke York because obviously it's been nuked because everyone's mutants now, so it's now Nuke York.
I like that. That's a good pun. Nuke York. Okay, look, I wrote this one down for the synopsis, so I'm not going off the back of my brain. Because I was like, I won't get this right. But Akira, it starts with an event that blows up Tokyo, that leads to World War III. And then you got years later in 2019, the far future of 2019, the streets of Neo-Tokyo are like filled with violent protests and bike gangs. And there's one member, Tetsuo, who wrecks his bike after a huge chase with a rival gang. And in that crash, Tetsuo starts developing like telekinetic powers. That threatens like telekinetic powers that threatens the entire like world. It threatens the complex, the city, the people, his own friends, and they try and keep those powers at bay, but it breaks out, and he starts becoming obsessed with another child called Akira, and that's the basic plot of this. Look at me go. And I didn't actually mention Kaneda. So that was well done.
When was the first time you saw Akira? Do you remember at all?
Yeah, I do. It was on VHS. No, well, I don't remember the specific moment of me watching it for the first time, but I remember the feeling of watching it for the first time. And I know that it used to show on BBC Two a lot when we were younger. And I caught like chunks of it on BBC Two now and again late at night, and just like, what is this? This isn't, again, like I was just saying, I'd watch it and go, this isn't for me. This is like adult, and this is naughty and weird for me to watch, and I'd just be obsessed with it. And eventually I caught it on a VHS copy, and it might have been someone like you or one of our friends at school's older brothers or something like that had it. But that we ended up getting a VHS copy of it. But it's definitely on VHS the first time I watched it. Yeah. But I can't remember my age, because I didn't see it in like 88, obviously. I was like 3 years old or something. But like it was some point at like middle school, I think. So maybe we were like 14, 15 maybe.
Yeah.
You? Have you got better memories? You've always better memories of this.
I remember, like, so basically my cousins came up from London, and they were staying for the weekend, and Jonathan Ross did this special, and it was just called Manga, I think, and you can actually find it on YouTube. I found it and watched it, and it's so bizarre because it has the very first manga or anime convention, and it's in Birmingham, and it's like above Nostalgia and Comics. And it's like this tiniest like convention.
What, the little kind of mezzanine?
Well, it's got like, because it's got the hotel above it, hasn't it, or behind it.
Oh, I thought you meant the little mezzanine in the comic shop.
No, so they had like a suite in there or whatever for the Comic-Con. And but like if you look at like that, like if you watch the video, I mean I'll send you the link in a minute. But so basically, it's got Jonathan Ross, like, because Jonathan Ross is like a massive kind of comic book anime fan anyway, and it's so funny. He's like going, Akira has just come out and it's taken the world by storm. In England alone, it sold 7,000 copies. I'm thinking, wow, is 7,000 a lot? That doesn't sound like a great deal. Just a quick correction. It was actually 70,000 copies of Akira sold, not 7,000, which is actually a lot more impressive now that you think about it. And it was also the 5th anime convention. So, it'd been going for a little while, this little anime boom in the United Kingdom. Anyway, back to the show. But, like, you could just see, this is, like, where the seeds of, like Japanese animation, like, spreading outside of Japan. Yeah. I think, as a kid... Yeah. I remember, I have a very vivid memory of watching Laputa, Castle in the Sky.
Yeah.
On CITV, but I'm pretty sure they serialized it, so they chopped it up.
Okay.
Because I remember
that was really normal.
I remember it being on CITV and watching it over a couple of weeks, like little bits. But anyway, so my cousins were staying around, and I'm like, and basically at the end of this like manga kind of little half-hour documentary, he's like going, tune in tomorrow because, we're going to play Akira for the first time. And this was like 94, so the film was already out it was like 6 years old at that point. Because I think when it actually came out of the cinemas, it actually got quite high in the UK charts,
it was huge
I think.
in the UK.
Yeah, it did really well.
Yeah.
But like... So the next day we stayed up really late to watch Akira because I think he was on at midnight. But before that was Mad Max, and I'd never seen Mad Max. And bear in mind, 94, I would have been, 9, 10, something like that.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's one scene in Mad Max that sticks out to my mind where I think Mad Max ties a guy to the back of his his car, and he like drags the guy by his arm and then like rips the guy's arm off or whatever. That always sticks in my mind. I haven't watched the first Mad Max in a long time, but that image
sticks in my mind. Actually.
Does that happen in it?
I don't remember. I don't really like the first one that much.
Yeah, this second one's where it gets fun. But then when Akira started, like, and it was actually the Japanese version, so it wasn't like translated or anything like that. I mean, it obviously had subtitles in it.
Yeah,
but
yeah. You're mentioning all the right stuff. It's good.
But I'm surprised I'm not as big a fan of anime, because when I first saw this, it like literally blew my mind. Like after seeing this, like I kind of got into like Guyver was like a big thing, because it was kind of, if I remember, Guyver was almost sold like a magazine. So like every week you could buy 2 episodes on video, and they were like £5.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Those.
And obviously, anime.
We talked about the Street Fighter animated movie, and obviously they're all made by different companies. But in the UK, they were put out by Manga, who were like a company that kind of, I don't know if they still exist. I assume they do.
They do. I was going to talk about Manga, so yeah, like.
And like there was other films like Ninja Scroll, Pat Labor. There was loads. This was, I mean,
Ninja Scroll, Devils. What is that called again?
Yorotsutoka. I don't know, the one where the sex demons kind of
the sex demon
the sexy
one,
demons. There was that one. There was Vampire Hunter D. There was all sorts.
Vampire Hunter D. Yeah. It's basically manga. I mean, anime was. We'll get into this more, but anime was just unknown. And in Britain, there was a guy called Frayne, who he ended up thinking, well, Akira's fantastic. Maybe there's more of this. What if I set up a company that just brings over Japanese animation to Britain? Like, it's like, he says it will treat it like a record label, like Def Jam. So if people are coming to us for like you go to Def Jam for a type of rap. People will come to Manga for a type of animation.
Yeah, okay.
And he was so fucking successful that I think we need to mention that like in Britain, especially for people our age who grew up around this time, the terms manga and anime are interchangeable. Like people will just call everything manga because it was such a popular brand that everything became known as manga. And it's annoyingly complicated because obviously manga is the comic books and anime is animation. But like everything just became known as manga films. And for years,
wicked
basically,
logo, like a big
red
bold logo with white typeface in the front and then the Japanese in the middle.
Yep. And they went on to basically, for me, like Ghost in the Shell was their big one.
Oh yeah,
they brought over here, like and they brought over Neo Genesis Evangelion and stuff like that. Like
did they
were
put
just
out
everything.
Perfect Blue as well? I think they did.
They would have, yeah. Literally anything in the 90s was just released by them in the UK.
Anything,
and it just
other than Ghibli, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because Ghibli had deals elsewhere. Yeah. But like it just a manga basically created an audience in Britain for Japanese animation. It was almost like when you started watching this stuff, you discovered this secret world of stuff you didn't know existed. You know, like you opened a door and there was just a whole world of animation that was so different to you could get elsewhere, and that's just became like a phenomenon in Britain through manga.
Well, I mean, like when I saw this film, like, you know, the most I'd seen was Disney films or Land Before Time. You know, those kind of
Bluth.
Forgotten the Bluth films and stuff. And like, you know, this is the first film where I saw a person's head explode. I saw a naked female, like animated female,
animated,
you know, and it was just like, it was just an overload to the senses. It was just insane, and not on top of that, the animation is just. It's mind blowing. Do you know what I mean?
Some of the best ever done. The animation,
you know, and like, like, not to get ahead of myself, but they do I forgot. It's like the 45-degree angle or whatever, which is notoriously one of the hardest things to draw anyway.
Okay.
Where it's kind of, it's not overhead and it's not flat, but it's kind of like on an odd angle.
Yeah. Okay.
And they do this in the film so much, and it's like, I don't even know like how you'd even begin, especially the bike. How the hell you would go about animating that? Like, it's just nuts. Like
there's the
getting
perspective in this is what gets me. Like, and but as they move, everything moves. The background moves, the camera moves, things move in relation to the camera to add that perspective. There's weird little bits when like the camera will tilt up and the road and the buildings will move with it to give like naturally how they would, and that's weeks of animation for little shots and stuff. It's so impressive.
There's so many parallax, so that's called parallax, where you kind of have the background and foreground, they move in different, like they move in opposite directions, but then you add a camera move to that and it kind of makes it look like it's kind of like it's a camera moving in a physical space. I mean, the way you do that is literally you'd have a stack, it'd be stacked up of like loads of thin planes of glass, and you'd put the background in between one plane of glass, and then you'd put the, I don't know, foreground in one, and then the character on in between another. Let's do that again. And then what you'd do is you'd put the background in between one of the planes of glass, and then you'd put the foreground in between another one, and then the character in between another one, and you'd layer it up like that, and then you can move them all individually, and then put a camera on top and have that moving as well, and they kind of create like a kind of like, as I said, like it's moving in like a real space.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
There are some parallaxing shots in this that look a bit naff, but I kind of think it also adds to it. It kind of makes it a bit otherworldly as well at the same time.
Yeah, sure.
And it just makes the city seem so grand and so big.
It's like they were doing in this a live action repeated in animation in a way that like no one in the West had seen it that way at all, and it was just so different. It's hard to overestimate how different it was.
To me, I can imagine it's like watching Star Wars for the first time, because the things they do, like that like the first sequence is the bike chase, which is just so well done. Like there's like just the ripples of the clothes as they're driving along, or like where people, like, you know, I think the one kind of when he pulls out like a stick just to smack the other one out, just I don't know, just I can't verbalize it, but it's just you've got to watch it just to see how good it is. And a lot of the time it's like a background with just like speed lines, but it's so effective. Sure. And like one common misconception about this film is that everyone says it's all on ones, which means it's 24 frames a second all the time, which is not true. There's a lot of twos and there's some threes. There's even scenes in the bike scene. I mean, I can catch it just because it's what I do for a living. It's
what you do, yeah, sure.
There's bits where some of the bikes are on ones, some of them are on twos and stuff, but you don't notice it because it's just so frantic and...
Yeah.
But, there's so many great sequences in this film.
We talk about like the impact of the film as well. Like I think it's really key to say that it was not the first, you know, despite what I said at the beginning, it wasn't the first Japanese animation films released in the West, but it really was the first Japanese animation films released in the West that wasn't gutted by American studios to try and fit it to American audiences and expectations. So like you had stuff like let's say Nausicaa, the Ghibli film, who's quite famously was gutted into like 25 minutes was taken out of it.
That's shocking. Like why would you even take, like, it's only like a 90-minute movie anyway, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. Total just gutted for the audiences. And they tried to aim everything at kids. So no matter what came out of Japan, the American release would take it, gut it, aim it towards kids, and it would get dumped off on VHS onto TV shows, like you were saying, or like just dumped on like weird cinemas around the US. There was nothing that was a big release. This was so different in the fact that like this was like it was such a cultural bomb to audiences of adult animation with complex scene, like horror, violence. It was always going to make a bigger cultural impact in America and the West than it did in Japan, and that is its legacy ultimately. Is that it didn't do that well in Japan.
Well, it did okay, but the one thing about Japan is they don't treat animation as a genre. It's not a genre. Like so in the West, we treat animation as a genre. It's kids' films.
Yeah,
but in Japan, it's just another way of telling a story.
Yeah,
it's just another medium to tell you a story, which I think we've gotten better at that, but still to this day, I think, most of the films, animated films that come out in the West are still kids' films, or they're like Soul or something like that, which have a lot of adult themes and stuff like that. But we still get stuff out of it. But like they're not made for adults at all.
No.
Like,
even like TV shows and stuff like that. Yeah, I think like my point about it making a bigger impact abroad than Japan is like nothing looks like Akira. Like Akira has kind of fallen out of popular consciousness somewhat. Like things aren't coming out of America that is like Akira. Sorry, Japan that's like Akira.
Right.
Like the look of it, the style of it isn't like modern anime at all. Like it just didn't have that lasting impact to what anime looks like. And like I think that's really key to understand what a weird little cultural artifact this is. Like we'll get to the creation of it, but he was aiming this in a Western audience. Like he was basing this on Western like media, and he was pushing towards that way, which is so different to the kind of the consumer class that anime was always pushed for in Japan. And like this period, it's worth to say, like it's not just the product of Akira existing is not just the fact that it got pushed outside of America and outside Japan and makes such a big impact in America, but actually what's happening in animation in Japan is really key to what Akira is as well, because we're getting what people have called like that golden age, whereas in the 70s, I think 49 animated feature films were made in Japan. Things like Lupin the Third, you've probably seen them. The Belladonna of Sadness, I think is Japanese. But like, in the 80s, 220 animated feature films were made.
Wow.
And it's really important to know that like Japan was coming out of the 60s and 70s into the 80s in an economic boom. And that's why stuff like, Nintendo exists and Sega exists. It's why our childhood was full of these Japanese things like Akira. Because of this big boom in consumer classes in Japan. So for the first time, I mean, anime had been a thing in Japan since like the 50s. But what that meant is by the time the 80s came around, the people animating were geniuses. They've been doing it for 30 years. And the people who had grown up with that animation.
It's like the Disney old men, do you know what I mean? Like, they were so amazing at that. They're so gifted that they could literally do a bike that goes 360, spins around, it does whatever it needs to do, like without thinking about it. And
what you can add to that is the fact that people had grown up with animated films in Japan were now entering the industry. So people like they were coming into this period where you not only got the clash of the geniuses who've been doing it for 30 years, but kids growing up with it who wanted to make their own impact as well. And there were no expectations, but there was a lot of money. So like really like. I still like anime. I like watching anime, but like there's something about anime in the 80s where there isn't expectations about what it looks like, what it feels like, and tropes of it, and it's not got like pandering fan service in the way that stuff happens now. Like it's prior to like otaku culture. It's prior to that kind of this is what anime looks like, cat girls and whatever, big eyes. It's prior to that kind of almost like that cultural trope that anime becomes, and the 80s is just wild, and they were just playing whatever they wanted to play with, and you got stuff like coming out the 80s like Angel's Egg, Grave of Fireflies, Totoro, Gunbuster, Cowboy Bebop, like Love Hina, Card Capture Sakura, Macross, like Gundam, Dragon Ball, like is all coming out of that period, and these are all different, they're all anime, but they're all very, very different in their presentation and what they look like and what they feel like. And they all go on to kind of make what's now modern anime. And this thing that almost sits a bit apart is Akira, that was so big outside of Japan, but hasn't really ever done anything in Japan as well. And there's good reasons for that as well, actually, beyond the kind of thing that it sits a bit separately. I think it's fun looking at 80s animation. It's fun looking at 80s anime. I think there's no like expected boundaries for it. Like it can be hypersexualized, it can be violent, it can be gory, and audiences had no expectation of what it was going to be in. So this started off as a comic book, didn't it? Like was it like 82? 82, yeah. The Kashimaru Otoro, he'd been writing serials for ages, and he was always writing sci-fi, like and he'd had a bit of a mixed experience with kind of adapting stuff. So I think Domu was his comic before this, was about a girl and an old man in an apartment block, and it goes to wild places. But he basically got, because that was so big, he got a big contract from the publisher to write a new comic, and he came up with Akira, which he was like, it'll probably be quite short, 10 chapters I think he put in originally. And he wasn't expecting it to be a success. He just kind of had a basic plot outlined of about destruction, really, more than anything else, about kind of destruction of Japan or Tokyo. It was just one of these things, as he started writing, he couldn't finish it, and it kept on growing, and it kept on changing, and he kept on adding to it, really. And that, like, he didn't know where to go with it at all, is what I was saying.
Do you know how much, obviously, because Akira is like 3 massive, if you look at the collection, it's like 3 massive volumes, isn't it? I don't know how many issues.
6 volumes.
Is it 6
6 volumes? Yeah. It's 2,000 pages, Akira is. And
so obviously there's going to be differences.
Huge differences.
But does it what are the main differences? Do you know at all, or?
Yeah. It's quite weird that the film itself, it's one of these, we talk about this a few times actually in films that we've looked at, but it's one of these things that he was the writer of it, he was also the writer of the manga. He actually ends up getting told to adapt it halfway through, and because he had such bad experiences with adapting his stuff before, he took creative control of it.
And what actually
so he ends up directing it, yeah. And what actually happens is the film gets finished first before the manga. So the manga doesn't finish for 4 years until after the film comes out. Like, I think it's 1990 or 1992 or something like that. It finishes.
Well, I'm guessing he drew the comic book as well.
Yeah, he drew the comic book.
So, so during production, was he still writing the comic and drawing the comic as well as doing the film? That's nuts.
It was made like before, during, and after, and he's been quite on record in the fact that the film existing changed what he wrote. It made him look at his work differently as he was working on it, and it made significant impact into his comic as well. And I think the best way to word it up is really that the film kind of represents like 2/3 of the first volume, and like a third of the last one is the kind of the best way to quickly sum it up.
Is it a bit like Scott Pilgrim where all the middle is just gone?
Yeah, all the middle is just gone. And I think like there's very specific things that make it really different, but what really is the biggest difference is the fact that there's no main character in the comic. So Kaneda isn't such a lead protagonist in the comic as he is in the movie. And I think by changing that structure immediately, you immediately change how the presentation of it as well. The comic is much more about the city of Neo-Tokyo, and the situation they're in, and how this levels of destruction affect that city. And I think it's the only failing of the movie is the fact that there is too much going on and there's not enough to be able to resolve it. Like, you don't really get much resolution of like the political class, even though you see it. Like, you don't get much resolution of what like the kind of the coup means to the city. You don't get much resolution of what the cultists mean, and you don't get much resolution about the kind of biker gangs as well. The film kind of strips that away and becomes a story about Tetsuo and Kaneda, really. And it's good. It's a good story. It's a good film, and that emotional beats are there, but those emotional beats between those characters even barely exist in the comic. Their relationship is not as tight in the comic, and it's and Tetsuo is not as he's not as sympathetic in the comic at all. He's much more of an out-and-out villain, and it's much more specific about that as well. There's tons of stuff like Lady Miyako is a huge character in the comic. She's a giant character in the comic, really important. She becomes one of the main like kind of protagonists, antagonists at the end, depending how you look at her. In the film, she's in like one scene, like one tiny scene, and she's not even named. And
which scene's that? Which scene's that?
When Tetsuo is going to find Akira, she's being carried by tons of cultists on like on the backs of like a little kind of throne thing. And she's one of the most important characters in the comic, and is not even present in the film. It's things like that are really weird about the fact that they are different things. Like they're both adapting the same kind of source story, but they are very different things, like end products of what story's going on. And the biggest difference, one of the other biggest difference is Akira is a character in the comic book. Akira is alive. Akira becomes a really important character.
Oh, Akira's alive. It's not like a test tube. It's not kind of. Like
you just find his organs in the film. Tetsuo becomes Akira's like a henchman in the. In the comics and stuff like that, and it becomes a big war. Can't remember the specific name on it. Something of Neo-Tokyo, but like the whole idea that Otomo had was basically. Like, there's loads of media about apocalypse situations and cataclysms. What if the cataclysm happened in the middle of the story and we could tell the story then? And the funny thing about the film is that actually doesn't happen. The apocalypse that happens in Akira happens right at the end of this film, and then they wrap it up by saving the day. But in the comic, the apocalypse happens, and then it tells a story of what the apocalypse in Akira... in Neo-Tokyo actually feels like, and impacts all these characters that you've got to know, and how it changes the entire world and city with this new like Akira, this villain now existing as a character. Really, so it's very different, very very different.
So the end of the film is that they kind of create like I'm gonna butcher this or get it completely wrong, because I think this is the first time I've actually sat down properly to try and figure out the plot. Okay. Or really pay attention to the actual story. But like, so they essentially like, it's creating another dimension, not dimension, but like there's like almost like a new Big Bang or a new universe being created, isn't there? Essentially, kind of at the end of the film, and it's getting contained, so that it doesn't cause a massive nuclear attack like it did before. Is that right? So the nuke's inside of the universe, and that's what's the Big Bang or whatever.
I think, there's a lot of imagery in the film about the explosions being like Big Bangs. This about kind of creation from destruction kind of stuff. And I think the end is meant to be that Tetsuo is kind of becoming a god of this plane of existence that he shapes, kind of. I think that's kind of what's happening.
But like, it's just like, it just goes to show like how dropping an atomic bomb on a city will have an effect years and years and years and years just within the zeitgeist. Like, so we watched Ran, which obviously last week, which was, a lot of that was, based on, Hiroshima. I can't pronounce it. Why can't I pronounce it?
Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah. And then this, like, literally just it opens up with an atomic bomb, or what you think is an atomic bomb, but it's actually not, is it? It's Akira, the first one you see, isn't it?
Yeah. The huge explosion. It's about destruction. It's about a fallout of that nuclear explosion and what happens. It has deep roots into that kind of World War II era Japan, and that and like. It's not just about the nuclear bomb. It's mixing two things, actually. Like, a lot of this is about the kind of World War II era Japan and their war crimes, It has stuff about, like, the kind of militarization of the country during that era. It has stuff about the kind of medical trials and that the cruel medical and bioweapon stuff that Japanese would do in Manchuria. That's in the kind of dealing with the espers in this. It's about that kind of weird, horrible history that Japan were trying to come out of, the end of what they call the Showa period. And in the same way that like the Olympics got used as that in the 60s in Japan as showing that they were this bright new country out of like the problems. Sorry, in the 70s or whatever it was. Like this is forefront and putting the Olympics again as a kind of message that they will use the Olympics as a cover for like the ridiculousness in their own society.
Well, I thought that was nuts.
Insane. They had the Olympics in 2020.
I was going to say, yeah, it's set in 2019.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the Olympics next year, isn't it?
It's so weird.
Like, I don't know how
and obviously
far advanced...
the memes are very high. The memes are very high in Japan.
I know, yeah.
Delivered,
but how far in advance are the Olympics announced? Obviously, back in 88...
Not that advanced.
I was going to say...
I think it's like 4 or 5 years or something like that, I think.
I bet you it's longer than that. I reckon it's probably a good... Like, if you think about the World Cup and you
probably is, yeah.
That was a good 10 years, maybe longer?
I think I meant they announced 4 or 5 of them at a time, I think is what I meant.
Okay.
So that would be about 10 years, yeah. I think and also it's really important to say as well that this is also influenced by the 60s, 70s Japan as well. It's not just World War II. And it's really, the 60s, we won't know much about Japanese politics, but the 60s saw the biggest protests that ever took part in Japan still. There was Prime Minister Kishi at the time, was one of the... I don't know how to even go into this. He was a high-ranking member of World War II Japan, and he ended up being the Prime Minister of Japan in the 60s. It's basically if Germany elected Himmler. It's so it's so weird. He was in charge of Manchuria during World War II, and that's the worst thing Japan ever did, and he ended up being the Prime Minister of Japan, which led huge amounts of fucking protests in Japan, massive things, and student uprising and demonstrations and stuff. And Otomo is so writing about this in Akira, he's so going into this spirit of youth protest and youth revolution and youth kind of running these gangs to fight against the government and fight against the military and stuff, and that is seeded into Akira in a way that you would someone maybe older than him wouldn't be writing. I think the fact that he was living through this was so important to him. So it isn't just about World War II, it's not just about the bomb, it is about Japanese society as well. And it's also and he's mixing this in with Western films that he loves. And that he's quite open about this. That he was influenced by Star Wars. He says this fucking Star Wars always. But I think Blade Runner's the other one he mentions, which is I think it's quite obvious when you actually watch it. But he's bringing all that influences in, and he says he loves writing sci-fi. But for this, what he really was enjoying doing is mixing kind of American sci-fi with the Japanese stuff that he was doing, he wasn't thinking it would just be good in the West, but it was definitely occurring to him that this might be a really big hit in the West. He also says that he was influenced by War of the Worlds and 19th century London, and he brought that into Akira a load, especially the animation, which is quite interesting as well, because the only other animated film he really did was Steam Boy after this, and Steam Boy's massively about 19th century London. And Steam technology.
That's another great film. I need to watch that.
Steam Boy's great. It's so good.
You could I talked about it earlier, but he must have been influenced by those Western artists, comic book artists like Mobius and stuff, those French kind of artists who did those hyper detailed kind of. They weren't detailed in the fact that they looked realistic, but they were just super, I don't know, just
super detailed, and it's always about Mobius' stuff was always overwhelming, wasn't it? They have flying cities and huge landscapes and stuff.
Big vistas and stuff like that, and but then some bizarre kind of structure or kind of, I don't know, and the color palette was always kind of pastels, and I think kind of there's kind of a lot of pastel-y kind of colors, but then contrasted with the bright reds of Kaneda's jacket and his bike, and then Tetsuo's cape that he has at the end. So should we try and sum up the plot? I know you've done a little plot summary, but kind of what actually happens in Akira.
I think actually before we get into that, I'd just like to mention the production a bit. actually.
Okay.
Because basically he had this story that was ending up being shown that it was going to be quite fucking epic, like this, like Game of Thrones type thing, and they wanted to put it into film, and they decided that in order to even try and do this thing justice, it was going to call for a budget that had never been used in anime before. So it ended up being the equivalent of about $10 million, which was something like, it was billions of yen. I haven't got it in front of me, but like, and so to fund it, they actually was a merger of Japan's like largest entertainment companies at the time. So there was like 7 or 8 of these companies, like Kondasha. I won't pronounce any of these correctly.
Did Toho put it out?
Yeah, Toho put it out, but Bandai, Haduko, Machinini, Laserdisc, and Sumoto were all these kind of like entertainment corporations that all started putting money into it. So it came as 1.1 billion yen.
I wonder if this is why there's not much like merchandise for it, like it's like because the rights like are all tied
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I've got
absolutely all over the place.
Well, I'd love to have. I love my toys. They did do a Kaneda and his bike, but it was one of those toys where it's like in a pose, but the limbs move, but they only like swivel or whatever. So like you can only put him really in one position. You can't have him in any kind of position you want. It's just made so he can sit on the bike. That's it. But I'd love a range of Akira figures. I'd love it.
I think I want to talk about the future of Akira as well, but I think you're right. I think like the reason there isn't that huge merch is because the production of this was tied up in such complicated legal messes.
Well, and you talked earlier that it's kind of fallen out of the zeitgeist, kind of.
Yeah,
it's because they can't keep it in the zeitgeist because sure. You can't. I'm surprised there wasn't an anime sequel or.
We might as well say the biggest thing I'm surprised about is it's never been adapted into a series.
Yeah, totally. Like a.
I think that's the key thing that it should be adapted into is actually a long series, and there's very much precedent for it. Like Alchemist was like a TV series, and it diverted from the comics, so they redid like Alchemist Brotherhood. To stick to the series itself. I think it would make, and the fact that this is a 2,000 word like manga would really like owe itself to actually a series, because the manga itself is about the city. It's not about like one character, and that would be so good in serial form.
I guess though it's got so much to live up to in terms of the quality of the animation though. Like to do hand drawn, like I don't want to see it as CGI. I don't want to see it.
Sure.
You're not going to get a cell animate. They're not going to do a cell animation show anymore. That doesn't exist. It would be done like how modern animations, which are done on like 2Boom, where things are kind of like puppet tools and stuff like that. So I just I can't imagine like a full on hand drawn, not even cell, but even hand drawn version. I can't see it. But
well, that's what's key to this as well. That huge budget meant that they hired 70 people to animate this, that never been done before. You mentioned it before that like the animation went between 12 and 24 frames a second. 24 frames a second animation is insane. Like it's I
hardly do it because it's crazy.
It's crazy amount they have to draw, like, and as you say, it was hand drawn. And the end film,
160,000 frames.
160,000 frames, like more than I think that's more than doubled what had been normal for animation films at that point. They also did a crazy thing.
Disney do twos, which is one thing everyone goes, "Oh, Disney's all on ones." It's like not really. It's mostly on twos.
And they also did a thing that the dialogue was all pre-recorded, so the animators could actually do it to the performance, which wasn't normal at all. Like this was like one of the first times it had ever been done in such a grand scale for Japanese animation, and it just meant that the animators could create something with the smoothest and most like intrinsic kind of action kind of available. Really, it feels like you're watching live action, honestly. Like. And I think some of that is that just attention to detail. When you see like when you see all that kind of the tiny little frames of stuff when glass explodes and there's just like tiny little shards everywhere.
They animate slow-mo. They animate the slow-mo, which is nuts.
Yeah, animate slow-mo. Yeah.
The thing I love is like the light trails off the bikes, and then like all the bikes have headlights and stuff like that. And the way you do that, like now you just comp it on really easily by using like some After Effects preset to kind of put like the headlights in.
Right.
But what they do now, what they'd do there is they'd get a piece of black paper, and wherever like the whole, so they'd have a blank piece of black paper that's the same size of whatever the frame is, and they'd cut a hole out wherever the headlight is, and they'd blast light through that and then photograph that. So you have one pass that's all black but with this light in the middle or wherever that would animate around the screen. Then you'd composite the two shots together and then you'd get your lights on the headlights.
It's just when you watch it, the amount of like detail that's on screen at the same time. If you watch a group shot, everyone is in it is unique. They're uniquely moving. Their clothes are reacting to the atmosphere around them, you know, like flapping in the wind, and they're each individually moving. When you see stuff like the end showcase when Tetsuo is like absorbing all that mechanical stuff around him, like individual wires and bolts and things are twisting and moving and snapping into place and as you say, reacting to light around it individually, which it's not like a live action when you just shine a light on something. This is, you're animating light. Well, it's not like a 3D program now, you know.
It's the one thing that people don't even notice. It's the shadow. The shadows move around the contours of things. Like most of the time when people do shadows now, it's just like you basically, whatever you've animated, you duplicate that, flip it up around, or kind of just alter the perspective of it. But no, they animated the shadows like rotating around objects or falling off objects, and it's just it's mind-blowing. It's so good. It's
mind-blowing. It is absolutely mind-blowing, and I think it's one of the things watching it, like to say that how mind-blowing it would have been to see this in the cinema in the 80s. Like nothing could look like this before. It really hadn't. Like, and nothing to this detail to be drawn in that smoothness and stuff.
But
and
like,
I think what comes
no
out of
live
it as
action
well is,
film had looked this like epic before. You know, obviously you had Star Wars, but they couldn't do the things.
Star Wars isn't this epic in the same way. No. Star Wars suggests epicness. It doesn't.
This
it doesn't
shows
have
everything.
This.
You know, this shows what happens when the Death Star blows up and what
Sure. Yeah. And it revels in that destruction. This is what I think's really cool about it. Is like the destruction is focused upon, and it's exact. Like when destruction's in this, and it's the same with the comic. Like it's shot front and center. You're seeing the window smashes. You're seeing people kind of get affected by it. You're seeing like people fall off bridges as it collapses and stuff. You can even identify the individual people dying because they've given you a bit of the cultural scope around them and shown the characters as well. Like this is not about destruction on like a broken observer basis. This is about destruction about people in there, and they're seeing it, and you're in there with them. The camera's in there and showing you this. And it's not like Godzilla where like he steps on a house and you're not seeing anyone in the house. This is you're on the ground level and Godzilla's above you breaking everything.
Well, there's one sequence where Tetsuo is in the hospital, and like all these toys around him kind of start to form an even bigger toy, like a big teddy bear and stuff. And you're just in awe of like just the amount of detail that's gone into this, like.
The amount of effort and detail,
and like,
it's
so not like cool. When you draw these things, it's not like you draw them on like a gigantic piece of paper. You probably draw them on as big as an A3, if that. So the amount of detail that goes in, and like everything's individually coloured and stuff. So if you're thinking about it, you hand draw everything. Well, you do everything as a storyboard. Then you do your keyframes, which is like you'll do your first shot, your last shot, your middle shots, and then a few in betweens. And then you'll start doing all your in-betweens and sketching it out on paper and drawing it all out. And then you'd perfect it on paper. And then you'd put acetate on top of that paper, draw around it with like this black pen. And then you'd flip it over. And then you'd paint it. And you'd do that 160,000 times.
Yeah. I would almost love to speak to some of the animators on this, like more than Otomo. I'd like to speak to some of the. Actually, speaking of some of the animators, one of the animators on this was Satishi Kon, who did like the Perfect Blue. So like, I think this was such a mammoth effort that I think the it's like family tree you could draw animators that worked on Akira and then went out into anime itself, which probably most of them ended up kind of having a career on themselves because it just took everyone around them to come make this film. We need all of you. We need everyone that exists in Japan at the moment to come draw this. Yeah. And it's cool. What I love, like, you know, we're talking about like you know, we tend to talk about like auteur-driven stuff as well, like in this podcast. We're not exclusively, but we tend to fall on that kind of stuff. And this is one of those auteur-driven things as well, which, you know, you technically, you know, you talked about Ralph Bakshi earlier, like, who is obviously an animated auteur, but auteur systems didn't exist within Disney and DreamWorks. You know, like they were just kind of collective studio efforts of everyone pitching in together to make a film. Like, you know, you can speak about some of the Disney directors, but they're never really auteur-driven films. And this is absolutely driven by Otomo, and I think that's really cool and different. And it goes to show that, like, just letting a difference in the kind of studio system and the way you make something can change what it comes out as. If
you look at Disney, like, a lot of their directors, they're people who've worked their way up through the ranks. So, you know, they've been an animator, then they've kind of probably been
proven themselves.
Yeah, they've been in charge of one scene, and then they become like an assistant director or whatever, like an animation supervisor or whatever, until they become a director, which basically just means they're overseeing the whole, making sure it all comes together fine. But yeah, like,
they're making sure it gets drawn on time.
But when Otomo, he hadn't done it, as far as I know, he hadn't done an animated film before this, or a film at all. So the fact that they gave him a film to direct on such a big budget is just, it's not heard of. And the fact that, you know, he said, I'll only do this as long as I've got complete control.
Yeah.
You know,
I think, like, because Robot Carnival was something he worked on before, but I think it was just an anthology of various different people coming together to make a film. But again, that seems to be the only thing that he'd ever worked on animated style. I don't know how he managed to sweet talk his way into being able to, like, direct this.
Well, I think, I just said, I think
it's very cool.
I think they just wanted to make it, and he said, "Look, it's only going to be made if I'm in control and you don't say anything." Like, I think that's it, really. Well, it's his comic book. He had the power. It's either a case of you don't make it at all, or you make it with me, and what I say goes.
I get the impression it ballooned, because his previous work, he was quite mad when it got adapted, because they just kind of didn't do what he thought was important, really, and didn't do it right. So when he was making this, he pushed for just creative control. And I got a feeling that when they were like, let's adapt this, let's make a movie of this, because he had that control, he managed to just keep pushing it, and it just kept on ballooning to the point where it became something so giant and so massive. And like, you know, you're talking a period where, as you were saying, the budgets were bigger. There was suddenly a lot of consumption of this stuff. They were making so many animated movies a year. There was clearly an audience for it, that the studios just felt like they could do this. They would make money of it, and it would be successful. And especially because they just saw something in it, in the fact that it looked different and you could push it to the West, I think was the big thing as well. Whereas a lot of the stuff coming out, I don't think they had any, they weren't comfortable in the idea that they could push this out into the West. But this has clearly got tons of influence by Western films and stuff as well. And clearly they just had that kind of confidence that they would be able to make money on this. And they were right. They were very right.
So before we get into the main plot of it, like, it's worth noting that the music, like, you think like a film that's set in the future. Well, I say future, it's now the past, because it's like, 2019 is set. But like, and like, it's all about a bike gang who've kind of got the main guy, Kaneda's got this kind of like very futuristic looking bike that he's built himself, and that you'd think it'd have like a hard driving rocking soundtrack or like techno-y or whatever. But no, it doesn't.
The bike was based on Tron, by the way, as well.
Was it? I guess, yeah. Well, I guess it's got the light kind of
the light look of it, yeah.
But so the music is like going back to like Ran that we talked about the other week, with like the Noah or No, whatever kind of themes going on with some of the characters, like the the warlord and the one wife and that. Apparently the music is very inspired by Noah in this, where it's kind of got like those, it's kind of like just wooden glockenspiel, kind of, not glockenspiel, but it's like just wooden instruments, isn't it? Just kind of very elemental.
Yeah, it is.
And like
most of the
gongs
music
and
is.
stuff like that, where it's, you know.
I can't speak to this because I don't know enough about it, but I've read that the music's inspired by like Indonesian music.
Okay.
And it's weird and almost controversial because Indonesia was like basic colony of Japan during like World War II. So that cultural use of their music in this, you can read it two ways, and I don't know which way is accurate.
Okay, I got you.
Like, one, that it's kind of quite bad that he's using this music, or secondly, that he might be making a bit of a statement using it as well.
Okay.
But I might be very wrong on that, so I'm sorry if I am really wrong and I'm giving bad information. But it's something I kept on seeing when I was doing a bit of research on it, that people kept on kind of bringing this up, but I just, you know, I need an Indonesian person to come tell me about it. Mean, you know, like
politics aside, it does incredibly, like, just from
it's wonderful.
It's amazing in the film, and just kind of like almost like the chanting kind of like the chorus kind of like singing as well that happens, especially like when I think like Tetsuo is like changing and stuff like that. It's kind of like big gongs going on and like the big chorus chants. It like I would love to have seen this on the cinema, like watch this on the biggest screen possible, like seeing that giant huge like Tetsuo becoming that giant huge like baby, almost like
baby thing. It's everything about this is grand and big and different and like in your face, and I think one of the things that made it stand out as well in especially in the 80s is like most Western, I don't know how to say this, a lot of media is quite positive about how technology is a good thing, like but Japanese doesn't tend to have that. Japanese media doesn't tend to have that positivity about technology,
which is weird because they're like instigators of a lot of especially around this time, they were like instigators in a lot of it though, weren't they, really?
What do you mean, like, making new technology?
Yeah,
sure, yeah. But I think that's that. Then you got like cultural commentators saying technology's bad. Have you seen the A-bomb? Like it's but as a lot of American media and a lot of British media at the time was really about how the idea of the technocratic future will save you. I mean, it's not just about media. It's like it was a big thing in British, especially like cultural mindset, social mindset was about a technocratic future will save us, you know, it will fix everything, it will harmonize culture and harmonize the ecosystem. As long as we use technology to do it, we'll save the earth and save global warming and everything like that through the use of technology. This idea that technocratic stuff can be a vision of utopia. It was a really big thing in like the 60s, 70s America and England, 70s and 80s, like, and this isn't that. And it's, you know, it's not like I don't know, Star Wars, when the weapon is, you know, your weapon is your future weapon that's going to save everything. Like, this is your future weapon's going to destroy everything, and your technology and use of that stuff will not lead to a utopia. It will only lead to worse and like social situations and worse and like worlds. And I think maybe it's not unique, but it feels unique to me at this time, from at least on the stuff we're watching. The
way they draw the school and like the surrounding areas and stuff like that, it just all kind of, like what you were saying, it speaks to that kind of, it just doesn't feel nice. The schools are overpopulated and there's just random violence everywhere, like for these kids' lives. Much bigger things in the comics is the drugs. Drugs are massive in the comics compared to this. You get like a bit of an indication of it, and you get that scene when Tetsuo is looking for his hit and ends up killing the two people he kills one of them who won't give him the drugs and stuff like that. But the comic is full of drug use. It's all about it, really. Well, I mean, the bar owner, I guess, like he and like, well, don't forget the back of Kaneda's jacket as well.
Jacket and stuff, yeah. It's hinted in this. It's just in the comic, it's a lot more explicit. and explicitly written.
I guess
about,
you've got to pick your battles when you do a 2-hour film. Haven't you? Like
exactly. And as Otomo even says, it was the worst idea he's ever had to make this film when he was writing the comic as well. Which, as you said, I think he didn't get much sleep during those years.
He's still around. He's okay.
He's still around. Never really made much. I mean, as you say, Steam Boy
to be
is
fair,
the only other animated thing he ever made.
If I'd written and directed Akira, I'd be like, yep.
I'm done.
I'm done. I'm happy with that.
I've made my impact. I'm done. I think he might have gone into producing or something like that. I think, but more than in like keep on directing. Though he's got something I really want to watch. I've never heard before. I was looking up this. His follow-up to this was a live-action film called World Apartment Horror. And it was written by what's his fucking name? Satoshi Kon.
Right.
Sorry. So, like, it's got this live-action horror film that was directed by Katsuhiro Otomo and directed by Satoshi Kon. I'm like, what is this? How have I never heard of this film? Like, I really want to watch it, but I can't find it anywhere. I was searching I was sailing all the seas, all the piracy seas, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. But I think that'd be really fascinating. It might be bad, but it's unique.
Well, like 2001, he wrote the script for Metropolis.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, and then he directed a live-action film called Mushishi.
Yeah, Mushishi or something. Yeah.
And he's done music videos fairly recently. Well, I say
cool.
Recently, like 5 years ago.
But as you say, like music videos, especially.
He has Eisner Award. He's got Harvey Awards. You know, he's got all the big comic book awards.
But you're right. You're absolutely right in the fact that he doesn't need to make anything because people keep making his stuff. Like, was it Kanye West? The music video was just Akira. Like the amount of times the amount of time this just shows up in like pop culture past it is just ridiculous. People are keeping it alive. He doesn't need to do anything.
Well, I mean, like you only have to look at films like what's that superhero one? Chronicle is kind of like Akira, I guess. And like, I know we shouldn't talk about this thing, but like, I guess Fantastic Beasts kind of got a bit of that in there with the Ezra Miller's characters kind of got like that power that kind of can't be controlled or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but yeah, that is the same. Yeah.
But we won't mention that ever again.
But I mean, it just fed into making everything, like Neo Genesis, especially, like Evangelion, like and you know, Ghost in the Shell. The amount of things that just started coming out because of this is quite impressive, really. We should I do want to talk about, like, we're talking about the kind of, you know, talking about him as a product. We have to mention live action Akira. We have to mention like what is this insanity? And you were talking about weird rights earlier. I think one of the reasons there hasn't been a serialization of this is because the rights to the film are owned by Mr. John Peters. And
hang on, John Peters, the guy who did like Superman Returns and that. No.
Yeah.
Him. Okay.
That
so he
same
wants a
John
big
Peters.
spider in it somewhere, or
yes.
Or
So he got the film rights in 2002 and announced that he was going to produce a live action film that was going to be directed by the Blade director Stephen Norrington.
Oh, who did League of Gentlemen.
Yes,
and then
he's
quit
next
directing.
That was going to be his next film. So it goes after League of Gentlemen. He was going to do Akira, and it was going to be written by James Robinson, who also wrote League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen didn't go well.
It's weird though. Like I've definitely seen worse films than that have the directors have carried on. He must have just had such a shit time making that film.
He must have.
Like I can imagine Connery was probably like trying to ghost direct it or something.
I think he basically did. Yeah, and he pushed all the kind of his characters well, and it was. I mean, it was produced by John Peters. All the producing things in that film, you can just feel it. The introduction of the American character, who I can't remember his name now. Like, is so less heavy-handed in deciding what the look of this thing is, and the fact that it looks nothing like Alan Moore's work is so weird.
Yeah.
The fact it's like they don't even take like hints from it to kind of make it. It was already a bit of a successful story. It's just so lazy. It's a lazy film. That's why it didn't work.
But anyway. Akira.
Anyway, so he gets kicked out of that. He is so weird. His only quote that we've got for his making this film is he's going to say, it preserves the tone and the visuals of the original whilst telling a more accessible story to Western audiences. I'm like, dude, it made like 50 million. Trust me, it was accessible.
By what that means is in English. That's all it means.
In English, yeah,
that's all it means.
The weird history of it, I'll keep going through it because this goes on forever. This is 20 years of them trying to make this fucking film. The overarching thing is they're obsessed with making this film in America and setting it in New York. They're obsessed with it, and
what do I want to call it? Like Neo New York. The whole point of it being set in Japan is so important to it.
The whole. You know, we've spoke about it. It's not just that; it's the kind of culture of the 70s as well of Japan, the kind of echoing the 1964 Olympics. It's all that stuff based into it, and the fear and the technocrat stuff, the fear of technology and stuff like that is all a Japanese story, and the whitewashing efforts they're taking just to make it about white people is just so ridiculous.
What would they have done, like Neo New York then or something? Is that what they would have?
Yeah, and. Tetsuo keeps being called Trevor in all the scripts.
Trevor? Oh no! They've
so
actually
Kaneda keeps
scripts.
the name.
So scripts exist.
Yeah, these scripts exist. So in 2008, you get Robinson to come take over, the Irish filmmaker, and he was producing it with Legendary now. So Greg Silverman and Leonardo DiCaprio were producing it.
I knew Leonardo DiCaprio's name was involved somehow. I have memories of Christopher Nolan's name being touted with it.
Yes,
as well,
yeah. It's coming.
It's coming.
So in Leonardo DiCaprio's script, he didn't write it, but whatever.
I want to pretend he did. I want to hit.
Yeah. Manhattan becomes Japanese territory. So Manhattan becomes New Tokyo. This doesn't, and so 10 million Japanese people are living there, but it just happens to be located in the United States. This is the quote from the director. He said he thought it'd be really interesting to fuse Eastern and Western cultures and allow a mix of actors from both, rather than just whitewashing. You can set it in Neo-Tokyo, and have some white people in it if you want. You don't need to set it in New York. It's so ridiculous.
Shang-Chi has proven anything, that they could do a film.
They don't need to do this shit.
Yeah, they can just have it set in Japan.
So 2010 comes along, and you get Alan and Albert Hughes, who, welcome back to the podcast.
Hang on. They're not the ones who did
Dead Presidents.
Yeah, and From Hell, going back to Alan Moore.
Yeah, From Hell, yeah. Probably they got it off the back of From Hell.
Which is weird, because that film's not good either.
Yeah, but I know. But they, it's 2010, production stuff. They adapted a comic book and it was okay. I think they were like, well, adapt to this. It's kind of like comic.
I'm surprised the Wachowskis didn't get offered it, to be honest.
I'm sure they would. I'm sure they were, and I'm sure.
Because I'm sure they even did a Batman script at some point, unless that was a
fake
probably
thing.
But anyway.
So the screenwriters of that is Hawk Ostby and Mark Fergus, who did Children of Men and Iron Man, and they come on to rewrite that script that's set in Manhattan. Their script
still with the Manhattan.
Their script gets overwritten by Albert Torres, comes on to rewrite that. So this version of script, it's not totally sure which one has come online, but the dynamics of the original story, they could become brothers rather than just friends. Right. The villains and threats become more explicit in the film, rather than it just being about the kind of city. It heavily becomes about 9/11.
Oh, okay.
Heavily becomes about 9/11. And Akira is portrayed as this murderous, creepy, psychic child, straight out of a horror film, basically, who's a presence throughout most of it. And it becomes really weirdly misogynistic about Kai and the female characters as well, and they're tough of nails kind of characters, and that film gets completely junked as well. So then we get this is insane. Then you get Run All Night, I think the film's called. So Colette Serra, Hamey, is that, I think you pronounce his name, Colette Serra.
I have no idea who that is.
So in 2011, you will if I look it up again. So at that point, you get Christopher Nolan's brother coming on, Jonathan Nolan, who comes on to write the script. And that along with the screenwriter of Logan and Alien Covenant, Michael Green, and he takes Colette Serra's script.
I didn't know the same person who wrote Logan is the same person that wrote Alien Covenant. That does not compute to me, because one is actually good and one is actually terrible.
The writing's very different to what ends up on the screen.
Yeah, fair enough.
But they also get the screenwriter for Harry Potter, Stephen Clovens.
Gloves.
Yeah. So, but no one's really sure if Nolan, Green, or Clovens writes anything. But they know they're attached. But Colette Serra is the only guy who's been outspoken about this, who's the director, and he's fucking quotes. He goes like, nobody is interested in the anime, which is weird. Like, basically he's saying there's no main character. And he goes, Tetsuo's interesting because weird shit happens to him, and Kaneda is so two-dimensional, he's boring. But that's just part of Japanese culture. They never have strong characters. Ow. So we're going to have to change our philosophy going forward. It's like, what the fuck, dude? What the fuck? So every time some quote comes out, it's just like, it sounds like the worst thing happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, it sounds like someone taking over who has no appreciation of anything going on. So basically, this is when they start getting accused of whitewashing because of Colette Serra's
only now.
Comments. Only now, yeah. And because this kind of starts getting further into casting. So
really?
So Kaneda gets linked to Garrett Hedlund, Brad Pitt, Michael Fassbender, Keanu Reeves, Joaquin Phoenix.
Brad Pitt is who?
Kaneda.
No.
2010.
He was like 45, 50 then.
No, all of them are this. Brad Pitt, Michael Fassbender, Keanu Reeves, Joaquin Phoenix, Chris Evans, Chris Pine, James Franco, Justin Timberlake, Zac Efron.
At least Zac Efron and Franco are at least a bit younger, but Canada's needs to be 17.
Yeah, I know. It's fucking ridiculous, and they're all they're all very white. So in the script as well, you get Tetsuo, who's now called, in both it's Trevor and Travis. He keeps getting called in these scripts. Yeah. So you get Ezra Miller. So it's funny you mentioned him. Toby Kebbell, Alden Ehrenreich, Rami Malek, James McAvoy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which would be fucking brilliant.
Could you imagine?
Michael Pitt, Paul Dano, and Richard Madden. I would love to see Paul Dano as Tetsuo. It'd be so good.
If this was a bit later on, it would be the kid from Chronicle in there. What's his name?
Oh, what's his name? Yeah, sure.
Dane DeHaan.
Yeah, Dane DeHaan, thank you.
Oh, I tell you who it'd be now. It'd be the kid from Green Knight. You know, the Irish lad who's also in Dunkirk. And
yeah.
That's who he'd be on the shortlist now, I guarantee you.
He would be. And they've also decided to try and start casting Kai. So Keira Knightley, Kirsten Stewart, Mila Kunis. And this makes me laugh because the Colonel, this is when the characters look to the Colonel, Gary Oldman, Morgan Freeman, and Ken Watanabe. I love how Ken Watanabe's in it. They're like, oh, we could make the General Japanese.
So all people who have been in Christopher Nolan films.
Yes. It's because it's still linked to Warner Bros. As well, because it's John Peters. So it's Warner Bros. Trying to cast this, and they are just pulling out their actors. And Helen Bonham Carter's been linked for supporting role, so I guess she's going to be the cult leader. Going to be. Again, this never got made.
Hang on, the girl that Kaneda likes?
No, the cult leader in the comic.
Okay.
Who I've forgotten her name. But so this is another quote from the director. I personally reject the argument that Akira is necessarily a Japanese story, that it's somehow sacrilegious to set a new adaptation of it anywhere else. I think many of the themes in that story are ones that speak to the human condition and are therefore relevant anywhere in the world. If that weren't true, the original versions would never have been hit outside Japan. And you know what's really fucking irritating about that quote? You don't need to set it out of fucking Japan then, if it's already got global themes to it. Yeah. It's not improving it by setting it outside of Japan. It's not improving it by casting it with white people. these people are stupid.
I mean, to be honest, I think even if they made a Japanese production of it, I still don't think it'd be very good. I think it's perfect as it is, and it doesn't need, tell a new story.
So the last people to be linked to it.
Yeah, okay, there's more.
This hasn't stopped. Justin Lin and Christopher Nolan. They turned it down. Tommy Lee Edwards, who's the director of Book of Eli, was.
I love the fact that someone who was just went, "Do you want to do this?" and they're like, "Nah." I love how that becomes like a headline or like a,
And so David Sandberg, Daniel Espinosa, they both turned it down. Most recently is Jordan Peele. So after the back of like Get Out, he was offered Akira, and he was offered a contract which was giant, and I think it's the smartest move he ever did.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Because he's been able to just make films that he wants to make and not be linked into this fucking machine of just adaptation.
This film will be like the Ghost in the Shell one, which it would just get so much backlash.
Yeah.
From fans. Two, it would just be culturally insensitive, surely somehow. And it would just be. The budget will be that big that they'll get a director that they can kind of prod and poke around, that they can kind of
yeah.
And it just won't be anything. It will just be like, oh, here's a live action Akira. It won't be like the special. It won't be given the special treatment that it deserves.
It's just looking at money. Yeah. And I mean, to Taika Waititi's linked now. He's still linked. It's not officially not happening. I mean, he is directing Thor: Love and Thunder. His next project.
Is he doing a Star Wars one as well?
Yeah, he's still linked to Star Wars. He's linked to Next Goal Wins. I think is his own production after Thor. So I don't think it's going to be on his docket. I think he's dropped it now. But he was the last person attached to it, and it's such. I mean, I do not think he'd be good director for this. I don't think his style represents this at all. I think he can be quite culturally insensitive, if I'm very honest. I think Jojo is really insensitive in that cultural way, and I'm not sure he's the right person to be handed this. He's also becoming quite diluted in people's enjoyment of him as well. I think Free Guy is really showing how much he's started to kind of. Yeah, he is. Yeah. And we talked about it before. I found it was quite weird that he was Ratcatcher 2's father.
I was watching it and I couldn't work out who it was, and I don't know why it didn't click with me straight away that it was him. And I was like, what? Then by the end, when he was sitting on top of some tower, I was like, oh fuck, it's Taika Waititi. It's a shame because I used to like his older films and stuff.
I like his films, yeah. And I didn't like Jojo.
I just don't know if he's become overexposed or whatever. He's just become a bit of a irritating figure now, and I know that's probably unfair to say, but I don't know what it is. I don't know. And
they've put him and Ryan Reynolds in the same film, and they've caused an overload, didn't it?
I mean,
overexposed people.
Who do you think could make a decent Akira, live action Akira, like James Wan or someone like that? I don't know.
I
hate saying names like that because it's just an obvious fucking answer.
Yeah,
but the only interesting one would be you pluck an indie person out from enjoying their working in their own little pool, and you pull them out and thrust them in this big, huge corporate. Yeah.
I think the only interesting way to go with a live action adaptation of Akira is pull someone out of Japanese animation.
Or let Tashikon. What am I talking about? What's his name? Otomo.
Yeah, Otomo.
Let him direct it. He probably doesn't want to. He's like done.
Well, have him at least oversee it. I think the problem is that everyone's trying to make an American version of this film, an American version of this live action film, and you can still do American money, but I think pull someone out of like Japanese animation and make it more relevant to today rather than making the 80s film. Like, make it more about globalization in that way or something. Like, but you set it in fucking Japan. That's where it's set, and that's where the cultural themes are important from. And we're all we live on the internet. We understand different people's fucking cultures and different people's ideas, and then we understand things that cross over and speak to us more. This is one of the things that spoke to everyone. but you don't just fucking plop it in New York and put Brad Pitt as the lead character and think it's cool because there's a motorcycle. Like, it's just
you know what they'd do? It'd be like they'll just do, even if it's set in Japan or whatever, it'll be shot in an Atlanta car park.
Yeah, sure.
And it'll just be green screen to hell. It won't be shot in Japan or anything like that. It'll have no soul, and it will just...
I think, like, as well, my overarching thoughts about this film is that it's flawed.
Yeah, it is,
but it stands... Like, this and the manga stand as two individual things that are telling this story. I don't think you have to compare them. I think they both stand as two different tellings of this story. And I actually think it's really fucking impressive how this film works. How this film manages to get across all those fucking themes that are in that comic and that 2,000 fucking page runtime. They managed to get this into quite a coherent and quite a kind of emotionally affecting movie that works. It has something to say, you know? And nothing about putting it in live action is going to do anything better. There's nothing more you could do that this film does. Like, you'll just mess it up because it's a complicated story. And I think the only thing you could do is serialize it. I think the only way to do anything that's actually worth doing is just serializing it.
I think watching this as a 10-year-old probably did a disservice for me for this film, and then I just watched it because it was cool to look at. So I never properly paid attention to what the story was, because like you said, it does actually, if you watch it properly, you can grasp what the story is and stuff. I wouldn't say it's the best at explaining itself. Like, it does lots of exposition bits. So like there's a bit with the girl in the prison. And then the young child, well, the old child, whatever you want to call it, kind of speaks through her.
I don't think they're meant to look old. I was thinking that.
Well,
as well.
no, I think because they're meant to be children, they're meant to be. I assume somehow they're kept young, so they don't ever get like the wants and needs of an adult, so that their powers become a problem.
I think,
and so they still age, so they're like old-looking children.
No, I think they're meant to look drained. I think that's what they're meant to be.
Is that what they're meant to be?
Like they're kind of pulled of all their kind of energy that because they're so psychic, basically, that kind of physical energy is being drained out of them because it's being taken up with this psychic energy.
See,
I don't know. Like,
I took it that
I always thought of them as looking like tiny old people, but when I was rewatching it this time, I think it's not meant to be they look old. I think they're meant to look kind of drained is the best way I could put it.
I just took it, like I just said, that they were somehow kept young. Like they're in those chambers, aren't they? So I don't know if those chambers are meant to keep them like preserved.
I think it's because it's to help them move around.
Oh, is that what it is?
Because they're so weak physically. Yeah,
frail and stuff. Well, the one can kind of run around.
Yeah, one of them can. The others can't.
The one who looks a bit like Frankenstein or whatever.
It does a little bit.
So should we try and? I mean, we've blabbed on for ages, but we may as well.
I was going to say, we're at 2 hours, to be honest.
We can probably just summarise the plot in like 10 minutes, kind of.
I guess, to be honest, is there any scenes that we haven't talked about, I think, is the best part to say. Like, because obviously the beginning of the film is this brilliant motorcycle chase.
Yeah, between two rival gangs.
Between two gangs. You've got the Clown Gang, I think they're called, and and Kaneda's own gang. And that kind of fight that is incredibly brutal. It starts out like these kids whacking these people in the face with like crowbars and stuff like that. Like that leads into Takashi crashing into one of these, old tiny people.
Yeah, so it's worth noting that I think the Resistance, if they've somehow managed to capture one, haven't they? Is that right?
He's just escaped.
He's escaped.
He's escaped, and the forces are kind of after him. The military forces.
But the Resistance have kind of somehow got him, haven't they?
The Resistance know it exists. Yeah.
So by crashing into this like old child or whatever, it's awakened his abilities. Is that right?
Yeah.
So he's kind of got telekinesis abilities. But I think it's worth going back to it's worth going from the end of the film to kind of explain what happens in the film. So the end of the film, you find out in 1988, there's like a bunch of kids. They're in like a research facility, aren't they? To kind of for children with like telekinetic powers and stuff like that. Is that right? And then
Yeah.
I'm guessing the one just couldn't contain their powers.
Akira is like the most powerful thing that ever
Powerful.
existed. Yeah.
And he
But also malevolent as well.
yes.
I think that's the important thing to know.
But he looks just like a little innocent boy. He doesn't look.
Yeah.
But like, so he basically causes what the public believe to be like a nuclear attack or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's actually him. And it starts World War III. Is
Yep.
that right? Yeah. And then they somehow kill him, and then they kind of dissect him and kind of try to figure out, I don't know, or just learn more about him, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Then they kind of put his body into some cryogenic kind of chamber that's under the...
It's under the Olympic Stadium.
Yeah. Cut to, 30 years later when Tetsuo crashes into this boy. And then he's taken away by the military, I guess, to the same facility that Akira and these other children were at. And then he's kind of tested on. And then...
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
You can carry on.
I enjoy. No, I know. I like Ollie trying to explain
figure
the
it out.
Akira. Yeah,
but it's like when I was a kid. Like I remember Kaneda being like a massive deal to me. But
you're right.
He's just like a punk kid that just kind of doesn't really know what's going on. Really, half the time, he's only involved. Even though Tetsuo is his friend, that he was like in a home for like
they grew up together,
yeah, like in a kind of orphans, like an orphanage, yeah. And he kind of stuck up for him a bit, I think, because he was like a bit weak. But then I think Tetsuo kind of starts to take umbrage against that, and he kind of wants to be able to stand up for himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think that's the key to this. Is what Kaneda is actually quite forthright and kind of forceful in himself, and how shit this world is. The abuse from other people and like authority figures. It toughens Kaneda up to be able to fight back. But Tetsuo is complete opposite. He isn't toughened by this. He's broken by it. And whilst Kaneda wants to run the bike gang, Tetsuo wants to leave the city. He wants to take his girlfriend and escape. Mm-hmm. And they want to just get away from everything. But this like awakening of power in Tetsuo, instead of like making him feel more like instead of making him feel like more self-assured that he's now got these powers, what it actually does is make him vengeful and angry and that pain that he was bottling up for all the years of him being bullied and this world breaking him down and everyone kind of shitting on him explodes in anger that he wants to take out on the people around him. I think that's the key little stories that's playing between them two in the film. Right? That's why you get in the film of Katsuo. We haven't even said it yet, but Kaneda and Tetsuo yelling at each other. Tetsuo! Kaneda! Because Tetsuo kind of becomes a sympathetic character as it goes on as well.
Yeah.
With Kaneda actually trying to save him. I don't know what he thinks is going to save him, how he's going to save him.
Have you ever listened to the dub version?
Yeah, I actually watched both.
So I think there's two dubs. I think there's two British English dubs. The one I remember as a kid that I had on VHS, it had the voice of Leonardo as Kaneda from the Ninja Turtles.
Really?
That was always confusing. And I think that kind of almost alters the plot a bit.
Probably.
And then
Dubs normally do.
And then there's a more recent dub as well, which I haven't listened to. Anytime I watch it in Japanese.
Yeah, I watched the subs first, but then I did watch the dub as well. To be fair, anytime I watch a dub of anything, I actually put the subtitles on as well, which can be quite confusing because you get English saying different things. But I find it interesting to compare because I can never remember lines.
Right.
And at the 2001 dub, I actually think is quite good. I don't think you're missing much from it. I think it's quite faithful. Obviously, there's decisions that are made in dubbing. And decisions that are made in dubbing is basically they'll change lines to make them sound a little better when spoken out loud, but also to fit in the kind of scenes that exist as well.
Well, I guess as well, if there's a word that doesn't really have an English translation, they'll find the nearest thing or something.
But even like someone could be saying thank you in a way in Japanese that's extended and it means something particular. There's something at the end of this film when Tetsuo starts referring to himself using a different formality to mean I, and to Japanese audiences that makes a different change to what he's saying. The English line can just be "I am Tetsuo," but if you understand the kind of the language behind it, it means something a bit different.
Okay.
I can't go into because I don't understand Japanese, but like there's little stuff like that you just can't replicate in dubs or subs. And I think sometimes in dubs as well, what you need to do is match the length that people are talking for, because what you don't want is the flow of the film to be interrupted too much. So if a scene is on a person talking, whatever you say has to fit the same amount of length. Even if it's shorter or longer. It can't be shorter because then you just got this quiet scene of two people staring at each other, and weird hanging angles that will make everything feel awkward. So I think sometimes that's where, even with the best intents, that's where dubs go wild, because they have to try and do this balancing act, really. But from every dub I've ever seen, I think the 2001 is okay. I never say that. I just watch the dub. It's perfect.
I want to see the Spanish version with the cast of Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown too.
That's amazing.
So anyway, back to the plot. So Tetsuo is taken to this facility where the other children are kept. So they're doing some tests on him. He manages to escape. Is that right? And then he steals Kaneda's bike, which you see earlier on, he's kind of like, he's interested in it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like figuring out how it works and stuff. And so, yeah, like you said, he takes his girlfriend, he tries to escape the city. But then the clown bike gang, I think they catch him or see him. So they kind of chase him down. Kaneda and like the other gang members, they manage to find him, find Tetsuo and the other gang members, and like kind of say, well, they save him basically from getting killed. Or no, they're going to set fire to the bike, aren't they? Yeah, and then the one questionable thing that I don't think they should have done is where they rip the clothes off the young girl, because I'm sure she's only she looks 12,
sure,
and it just feels a bit icky.
Icky, yeah.
But then Tetsuo is then taken away again by the military.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I'm trying to think what happens after that. Is that when Kaneda then kind of gets involved with because he's already seen the girl before, hasn't he, from the Resistance?
Yes.
Yeah, because he helps her escape from prison, or not prison, or being questioned by the police or whatever.
Yeah. So it's Kyoko.
Yeah. I do like that sequence though, where because he kind of like tells everybody that he's like her girlfriend and stuff like that, which is very wishful thinking on his behalf. But you also, as well, you find out like the relations with the military, with the government, and then also like the mayor. The mayor is the way they draw the mayor is so weird.
It's so weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Like compared to how everyone else looks. When I was younger, I thought he was like the older children or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
Because he's kind of got the same kind of colour to him and stuff like that.
I don't think he is, but the comic does have more espers,
right?
More people who have been tested on by the military. One of them is this person I keep referring to, the leader of the cult. She's an esper.
Okay, got you.
And she ends up basically the last fight is between her and Tetsuo. Really?
Does she look like a child then, or not?
No, not really. No.
Okay. But then you've also got the kind of religious aspect to it, because you find out that people kind of, like, even though Akira was never like we said earlier, they said it was a nuclear attack, but there's like rumblings that Akira was a thing, and they think it's like a deity or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's because what's happening is the remains of Akira, the physical presence of him is so strong that it's kind of still reaching out to people in the city. So I think when you're hearing in their heads, you're hearing people yell Akira is actually Akira, like yelling that out in like the kind of psychic remains and stuff.
Right.
So it's like there's like this ghost haunting it, like this kind of very powerful psychic ghost haunting the city of Neo-Tokyo.
So what's the mayor doing? Because he's using both to kind of for his own advantage, isn't he?
Yeah.
So back at the hospital, so the kids are kind of scared of Tetsuo.
But the kids know that Tetsuo is a maniac and very powerful.
Well, because he's older, isn't he? So he's kind of got adult urges and stuff like that. So he's kind of so he'll use his powers for his own gain, basically.
Yes.
So why did they attack him as with the teddy bears and stuff like that? Was that just to?
I think what they start to try and do is calm him. They're
They're
trying to make contact.
They're just trying to play with
and trying to play with him.
Right. Okay.
And he immediately is so scary and aggressive to them
He thinks
that's
it's
when
a
they try and
threat.
kill him.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because then during that as well, Kaneda and the other girl, they're trying to break into the.
Yeah, they're trying to get Tetsuo back. Yeah.
Yeah. What are they trying? Are they trying to get to Akira as well, or not? Or are they trying to find out where Akira is kept?
I think it's more Tetsuo they're obsessed with rather than Akira.
Right, because the young old girl kind of starts to channel it through the girl, doesn't she?
Yeah. So the girl,
Like
Kyoko,
becomes a conduit or something for.
well, she's an Esper as well.
Oh, is she? Okay.
Yeah, but she's like latent basically, and the older girl, the older kind of girl who leads those three Espers, they recognise that in her and think they can use her to fight Tetsuo. So they start kind of possessing her.
Yeah, that's right. Because like I always forget about this action scene where like the chase, it's like a speeder bike chase from Star Wars, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they're trying to get to Tetsuo in this massive kind of like underground lair, and but it's actually really well animated, and I just for some reason I always forget about that sequence.
It kind of gets overshadowed by the rest of the film.
Yeah, and so yeah, they find Tetsuo, who he kind of leaves them for dead, doesn't he? Kind of like he attacks them, and leaves everyone for dead. And then what happens after that?
well,
he believes he keeps hearing the word Akira, doesn't he, in his head?
Yeah.
So he goes trying to find Akira because he thinks that's going to be the route to finding out what's going on with him or something. Because he doesn't realise Akira is like in fragments. In jars.
Yeah, he doesn't realise Akira's dead. Yeah. Whereas obviously in the comic he's not.
Right, okay,
that's the big difference.
Is he still kept underground though, or anything? Is he still? So he's
still
locked
kept on
away.
the Olympic Stadium. Yeah.
Okay, got you. And then what happens after that? So then this is where Tetsuo starts, like he gets the cape and everything like that, and he's trying to make his way towards the stadium.
Yes.
He's like following. Yeah.
And you also get like the coup happening at the same time then against the government. And then you get the cultists kind of getting obsessed with. They think that Tetsuo is Akira, and they start following him basically.
Because you've got that scientist character as well. Because he kind of prod Tetsuo a bit to kind of awaken his things a bit earlier or something.
Yeah, the scientist is massively just like almost like it's like the scientist inventing the A-bomb. It's like he wants to know what happens if you do this, you know. Yeah, he wants to know how much power there can be, and like doesn't really think about consequences.
Because then he has a showdown with. Well, he kills loads of. Well, no, he brings down loads of the bridge, doesn't he, or something towards the stadium, killing loads of people. I think he meets Kaneda there as well, and like, does he think he kills Kaneda again, or does Kaneda drive away? I'm blanking.
Kaneda starts attacking him, but
because he gets a laser gun at this point, doesn't he?
Then Kai comes up and they start fighting as well.
Yeah.
And she kind of defeats Kai, and then that's when he finds out Kira's just like a bunch of jars. And then Kaneda starts fighting, comes with his laser rifle, and starts shooting Tetsuo with his laser rifle.
That bike he's got defies gravity, though. I love it.
And that's when the colonel who staged the coup, he starts attacking him with the orbital.
Yeah, that's an amazing bit, that isn't it? Like, yeah, and it like basically chops off his arm.
Yes. Like, yeah.
But I love that. I love the fact that, because obviously he then attacks the satellite. He goes into space, but I love the fact that the shit comes out of like his exposed kind of wound. That like that's his like weak point, so that's where all the kind of the sinewy kind of blobby stuff starts coming out.
Yeah,
and then the like because he forms a metallic like a robot arm, doesn't he?
Yes,
and then it just goes to shit after that.
And then you get kind of Kaori restrains Tetsuo at that point, and the kind of the colonel's like offering to kind of just heal him and control him, and they'll go back, but Kaneda arrives and they start fighting again.
So you think it's Kanada's fault then that this all escalates, or do you think they could have calmed it down, or do you think it would have just happened anyway?
I don't think there's any calming Tetsuo at this point. Like, because this is when he starts mutating, isn't it? Like, he starts engulfing and
like. I can't even explain how good the animation is. The morphing, like, because I love body horror stuff anyway. Like we were talking about, like with Altered States, where I was like saying, "Oh, I wish it just went a bit further." This is what I mean when I want it to go further. Like the kind of just the grotesque nature of this, like cancerous blobby growth that just grows from his arm and just takes over his whole body. It's amazing. But like you kind of get sympathetic towards him then though, because he obviously wants to he wants help then, doesn't he? When the last minute possible. Yeah.
And that's when the kind of espers arrive, and Akira is kind of a latent psychic power. That's when, as you said earlier, they kind of create a new dimension for him to live in, and for the espers to live in and stuff like that, and they transfer Kaneda back to Neo-Tokyo.
Yeah. It's worth, but like Tetsuo ends up killing his girlfriend, doesn't he? Like, and then like Kaneda's all, like basically crushing her from inside of him, and then Kaneda's almost about to go as well. But, but yeah, this film is so good, so good, so good. Yeah. So what would you give it out of 5 then?
Kind of difficult. I think I gave it 4.5 on Letterboxd. I could be talked into 4. I could be talked into 5, but it's not a perfect film. Like even when you're talking through the as you say, it's like a it's like they took the larger story and made the best they could out of it, I think.
Right.
And the elements of the larger story that exist are just too tantalizing and not fully formed in it, and like it's admirable that they managed to tell a story that's so well rounded, I think. But because of that, there's things like, you know, you going, what the fuck's the mayor doing? That's not really ever explored. The themes of the religious stuff aren't really ever explored. I think Akira as a character is quite lacking, and you don't really understand the pain and the weapon and the power and everything else, I think, and in Akira because of that. And I think because of that, there's just stuff in it that's not totally there, which you kind of forgive sometimes when you're reading. But I've watched it so many times that it just made me want to read the comic, basically.
Well,
so I think that's why I say 4.5. It's so admirable that it exists, and it's so spectacularly animated. But it is slightly flawed, I think.
I mean, I think it's a 5 for me. Like I've never read the comic book, so I can't really speak to I can't be upset about what's not there and what isn't there.
Oh yeah, totally, yeah.
And like you were saying about the mayor and all that stuff, and I just think that it's just almost world building. It's there to kind of enriching a bit more. So I'm fine with what's there, to be honest. To be honest, like. It doesn't need to be there, but I think like it just enriches it just that little bit and just kind of makes it feel a bit more lived in.
That's fair.
And the animation is just like I said, like it's weird that I'm not a massive anime fan. I'm a fan of all animation, to be honest, but like I don't delve deep into like, I'm a big fan of like the big main anime stuff, but I don't really seek it out like I do other animation stuff.
Yeah.
But
I think. When I've shown you anime, it's the stuff that becomes the kind of what anime becomes the otaku culture stuff is the stuff you don't get on board with.
Yeah, I like Paprika and stuff like that, and things like that are great.
And if I show you perfect, if I show you Ghost in the Shell, or if or Cowboy Bebop, that's the kind of stuff you're gonna really like. But the kind of the other anime stuff is just you tire of it. Maybe
it's just. Big eyes, big head things like that. Like I never got on board with like Dragon Ball and stuff like that. I remember going around to yours and it was just literally 2 guys in the air going and you were like, and you had to explain to me, the reason why they're doing this is because they've got ahead of the comic book, so they're just doing filler episodes for now. They're just charging them. I'm like, okay, cool, awesome.
I have to say, I rewatched the release of Dragon Ball, because they recut Dragon Ball Z. They cut it as Dragon Ball Z Kai, it's called, and they basically recut the whole thing.
I've heard about it.
And I rewatched it in a kind of morbid curiosity, like that was, I loved that so much when I was young, and I was like, it can't be good. And I rewatched it, and quite honestly, the story from the first bit to the end of the Frieza saga is one of the best storytelling things I think that anyone's ever done.
I might have to check it out.
Stuff.
I might have to check it out.
It's hard because it's long. Many episodes, like they're only 20 minutes, and there's a lot of them. But just the character growth that was actually happening when this was being made. No one was doing this with serialized stuff when this was getting made, you know? No one was doing this kind of character growth and change and stuff in serialized cartoons, the serialized animation. And I think it doesn't get enough respect, I think, because of what it became in people's minds.
I will see your Dragon Ball Z and raise you mysterious cities of gold.
That's Mysterious Cities Gold is good.
It is good.
But I stand by stuff like the Vegeta story and Frieza story, and the fact that's all there in the first part of the series and then comes to fruition, and then even past that, the Cell stuff is really cool. And I won't say it's the best thing ever made. It's quite cheesy. It's made for kids. And I loved it then, but I think it should have its rightful place when we talk about serialized animation. I'm just saying Avatar wasn't the first people to do it.
Going back
and
to,
I love Avatar.
Going back to Akira though, I definitely find it hard to take away my nostalgia from it as well. Like I said, I just saw it such a kind of the perfect time in my life to watch something like this. It just totally blew my mind, and I just can't take that image away from it. It's always embedded in there, in my history and my DNA. Did you ever
that's what I wanted to get across as well, actually, is the fact that I think for our generation, and maybe a bit older than us as well, it was such a formative movie.
Yeah,
it was so different and weird and new that it just will never be beaten in that kind of mind space, that nostalgia space. I'm not sure if I showed someone who was 12 now or 15 now, it would have the same effect. I'm just not sure it would do that.
I reckon I think a cinephile would get a lot out of it. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe.
A person who likes film. I actually met someone the other day who doesn't like Jaws, and who claims to be a cinephile, and I just anyway, that's neither here nor there.
I'd be really interested in showing it to like a Gen Z person who loves anime, who hasn't seen it, and I bet tons of them haven't seen it because as I was trying to get across, it really does just fallen out of that pop culture kind of stuff. Fallen out of favour. I'd be really interested in showing it to someone and seeing what they think of it.
I want my Akira toys. That's what I want. I want a big plush mutant baby.
A big plush mutant baby. Yeah, totally.
But did you ever see they were going to make a Super Nintendo game of it? And
I did not know that.
And it was shown at E3 in 94, 95. You can look it up on YouTube. And it actually had, even on the Super Nintendo, it had full motion video clips in it and stuff like that. And I think it was a side scroller, and yeah, it looked ace. But it never came to fruition, which is a shame.
Never came out. Weird.
But anyway, I think we talked enough of Akira.
Yeah, this might end up being our longest episode.
It's a damn good film. It's in my top 20 of all time. So,
is it? That's awesome.
Yeah,
that is awesome. And it's just so much fun talking about animation. And I can't get across it more that the animation is probably some of the best animations ever been done. It's so spectacular.
It's that good. It was in my top 20, and I didn't understand it fully until when I properly sat down to watch it the other day. So there you go.
It's the things music videos are made of. That's why.
So, what are we talking about next time? What's on the docket? I think we're going to do some horror films or something.
Yeah, I think we'll do some horror. I think October is going to be Adjust Your Tracking Horror Month. Whatever type of horror pun you want to use for that. Spooktacular, is that a good one?
I'm not sure what we're going to do because obviously you're house hunting at the moment.
Yeah, it's all a bit in flux, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think I don't know what we're going to do yet, but James is going to be involved somehow. So it might be me and James, or it might be me, James, and Liam. We're not sure what's going to go yet. But we've got next coming up. We've got the episode with Brandon where we're going to talk about our favourites
we'll
from
wrap
our
up the
80s
80s,
miniseries. But yeah. So yeah.
We'll do some horror films throughout October. Don't know how many there will be, but we'll do some in October, and then we'll be back in November to do the 1930s. I think and the 1930s is going to be fucking weird, isn't it, compared to watching Akira?
Are there any 1930s anime? I'm sure we can find something. There's got to be some.
Oh my god,
30s
I don't know.
Japanese. Yeah, but that's awesome. Thanks for letting me watch Akira. It's always a good time to watch Akira. Yeah, thanks for listening, and please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on whatever you listen to us on. You can reach out to us on Twitter. We are at AdjustYourTrack. That's with a YR, not a your. And don't forget, if the picture's bad, always adjust your tracking.